Out in the blazing heart of Australia, under skies so wide they swallowed the horizon, there once thundered a machine so colossal it defied reason. It wasn't just a truck, it was a moving legend, a mile-long monster forged from steel, diesel, and pure outback madness. The ground shook when it moved. Dust rose behind it like a storm cloud, and anyone lucky enough to see it said the same thing. That can't be real. They called it the longest truck on Earth, a creation born not in some laboratory or corporate boardroom, but in the bush, where rules were suggestions and innovation came from blokes with dirty hands, spanners, and stubborn pride. In the outback, trucks weren't machines, they were lifelines, and this one would become the biggest, heaviest, and most unbelievable lifeline ever built. During the late 1980s and early 90s, Australia's interior was still wild. The roads were barely sealed, the distances endless, and the heat brutal. Out there, rail couldn't reach half the settlements, so freight moved by road, across deserts that could cook an engine by noon and freeze a man solid by dawn. Trucking companies pushed their gear harder every year, linking more trailers, hauling heavier loads, and proving that no one outdrove an Aussie truckie. That spirit gave birth to the legend. The question started as a joke in a roadhouse. How long could you make a road train before the road gives up? But jokes have a habit of becoming challenges, and challenges have a way of turning into history. Enter John Atkinson, a veteran driver from Winton, Queensland, quiet, steady, and unflappable. Atkinson wasn't a show-off, he was the sort of bloke who could nurse a rig through sandstorms without raising his voice. When Mack Trucks Australia decided to attempt something outrageous, to build a road train longer than any seen before, they chose Atkinson to handle it. The truck itself was a Mack Titan, a brute designed for punishment. Under the bonnet sat a 16-liter V8 engine, pushing more than 600 horsepower. A rolling powerhouse built to survive anything the Outback threw at it. Mechanics in Clifton spent days preparing it. New couplings, reinforced axles, upgraded suspension. Then came the trailers. One after another, they were linked. 10, 20, 50, 70, each connected with precision. Every airline double-checked, every chain tightened. When they were finished, 112 trailers stretched out across the paddock, forming a snake of steel over 1,400 meters long, nearly 1.5 kilometers of unstoppable engineering. On the morning of the record attempt in 1999, the town of Clifton woke to the sound of engines. Farmers left their fields, families parked along the dirt track, and reporters set up cameras that glistened in the rising heat. The air smelled of diesel and dry grass. Mechanics wiped sweat from their brows while Atkinson climbed into the Titan's cab. It wasn't showmanship, it was reverence, like a pilot preparing to fly a thunderstorm. He sat for a moment, checked his gauges, then turned the key. The engine growled to life. Deep, steady, and powerful. The ground vibrated. Someone in the crowd muttered, "If this thing moves, I'll shout the bar." Atkinson eased the clutch. The Titan groaned, then rumbled forward. For a few heartbeats, nothing else happened. Then, way down the line, the first trailer twitched. The next followed, then another. The ripples spread through the couplings until, impossibly, the entire chain began to crawl. The crowd erupted. Kids climbed onto bonnets, waving their hats. Reporters scrambled for photos as the beast picked up speed. The slow, deliberate, but steady. The trailers swayed gently, the steel glinting in the sun like the scales of some enormous serpent. Every meter was a victory. If one connection failed, it was over. But the Titan pulled clean and strong, the exhaust stacks belching smoke that shimmered in the desert light. It wasn't fast, but it didn't need to be. It was proof that human hands and hard grit could bend the impossible into motion. When Atkinson finally crossed the measured distance, the record was sealed. 1,474 meters of truck, 112 trailers, and over 150 tons of pure outback strength. It was official, the longest truck on Earth. As the engine idled down, Atkinson climbed out of the cab, his face streaked with sweat and dust. Someone shoved a beer into his hand. He took a sip, grinned, and said, "She pulled like a dream." That was it. No speeches, no celebration, just a quiet nod between men who understood what it meant to beat the desert at its own game. That day in Clifton wasn't just about size or spectacle. It was about identity, about proving that out here, where the road is longer than memory and the heat never quits, Australians could still do things their own way. They didn't just build the longest truck, they built a legend that would outlast the dust itself. When the roar finally faded over the plains of Clifton, the dust didn't settle right away. It hung in the air like smoke from a campfire, twisting in the afternoon light. People stood in silence, half stunned and half grinning, because they'd just witnessed something that felt bigger than the land itself. The longest truck on Earth had moved. Not in theory, not in a drawing, in real life, on real dirt, powered by real Aussie stubbornness. John Atkinson sat in the cab for a long while after the engine shut off. He didn't need applause. He just stared out across that sea of trailers stretching to the horizon and nodded to himself. For a truckie who'd spent a lifetime hauling through the outback, this wasn't just a record, it was a statement that the impossible could still be done with a spanner, a good engine, and the right kind of madness. The Clifton Run became instant legend. Word spread like wildfire through truck stops and roadhouses. Drivers across Western Australia, the Northern Territory, and Queensland couldn't stop talking about it. They'd seen plenty of triple and quad trailers, but nothing like this. It was as if someone had turned a railway line into a living, breathing machine. Within days, photos of the Mack Titan were pinned up in every depot, bar, and workshop in the country. But the truth behind the stunt was pure practicality. The Outback had always needed long-haul power. The further you went from the coast, the fewer roads, fuel stops, and rail lines you found. If one truck could haul what 3 normally did, it meant fewer runs, fewer breakdowns, and more supplies for the towns that lived at the end of the map. The record might have looked insane to outsiders, but to the blokes who lived it, it was just the next logical step in Australian ingenuity. After the Clifton event, road train builders across the country got to work experimenting with new setups. They stretched the limits of length, weight, and horsepower. In the Northern Territory, some hauliers ran combinations longer than 50 trailers for short test runs, trying to figure out what the roads and the trucks could handle. No one ever matched Atkinson's exact record, but the spirit of it carried on. Every new innovation, bigger couplings, stronger chassis, smarter suspension, traced its DNA back to that dusty Queensland paddock. Atkinson himself never made a fuss about it. When reporters came knocking, he shrugged it off. "We just wanted to see if she'd move," he said. That was how Outback drivers talked. Like understatement was part of the job description. But behind that calm voice was the kind of confidence you only earn by spending decades on roads that tried to kill you. Ask any old truckie about those days, and they'll tell you the same thing. Life on the road wasn't for the faint-hearted. You fixed your own rig, cooked your meals on the manifold, and slept under skies so big they made you feel small. Breakdowns happened hundreds of kilometers from help. Dust storms rolled in without warning. The trucks rattled your bones. It was more than a job, it was survival, and it was pride. There's something poetic about that day in Clifton. No marketing campaign, no $1 million prize, no corporate handshake. Just a handful of men in a dusty paddock, a massive truck, and a question nobody else was brave enough to ask. Could one man pull 112 trailers with a single engine? The answer, forever written in diesel and dust, was yes. And even now, long after the headlines faded, that record still whispers through the desert. Because in the end, that's what made the longest truck on Earth more than just a machine. It was a message that no matter how hard the road, no matter how wild the outback, Australia's truckies would always find a way to keep the wheels turning. That day in Clifton wasn't just a record, it was a reminder of who built this country. Men with calloused hands, sunburned faces, and the grit to take on the horizon and win.